We're live. Welcome. It's the Close the Deal show. I'm your host, Terrence McCray, rebranding from incarceration. Every week we bring you business information, tips, and insights from entrepreneurs and inspired individuals from the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as in Los Angeles and beyond. If you're looking for strategies to help you in business and educate the public, then you're in the right place. Thank you for joining us today. My guest today is not only a friend of mine, but is someone who works for a huge company, Google. And his name is James Driscoll. But he's here today to give his own insight, his own tips, but most important, his own strategy as being a team leader and showing other team leaders how to work as a team when you're dealing with team projects. So ladies and gentlemen, if you are already in the corporate world, if you are a small business owner and you're trying to build morale within your company or within your establishment, then you're in the right place to learn some new tools. Welcome, James.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Sarah. It's good to see you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I've been wanting to do this for a while. Glad to be on the show.
I'm happy you are on the show. You know, could you give a little background of academically how you've reached the level where you're at in your life?
Sure. It's kind of a non-traditional story for getting into tech. I went to Santa Clara University and I majored in political science and theater. So I got a BA and a BS. And I graduated in 2008, which was a bad time to graduate because of the economy. There was a big recession going on. And so there weren't a lot of jobs. But there was a really good election in 2008. So I was able to work on the Obama campaign. I made just enough money to eat. I had a really good time, and then I was out of a job in November when the election ended.
Whoa! Okay.
But I had a friend that was running a nonprofit up in Northern California, and so just through having that friendship, he invited me to interview for a job leading the advertising agency for this nonprofit. So the ad agency generated revenue that then supported the nonprofit. So I managed a team that sold print advertising for about 2 years. And that was similar to working on a campaign where you had a lot of hungry young workers that were ambitious, but it was more entry-level type positions. And I thought it was really important in that context to keep the team motivated because they weren't making a lot of money. For a lot of these folks, it was their first or second job. And so they're doing it to learn, right? If you're not making a lot of money, why are you going to show up and work hard every day? Either you're driven by the mission or you have the opportunity to build a new skill set or build on your experiences. So I did that for about 2 years. And then also through my network, a friend was working at Google and she invited me to apply for a role at Google. I was surprised because I'm not an engineer. Google's an engineering company. I never saw myself as a technologist. So I was surprised that she thought I would be a good member of her team. But she said, you're organized, you're talented, and I think that if you apply yourself, you would do well here. And so that was in 2010, October of 2010. Google's a pretty good place to work, and so I haven't left in 9 years.
So one of the things that I found interesting is the fact that not only how we met, but most importantly, you know, how you are always adamant about sharing insight, you know. And one of the things that I find interesting is the fact that you're a leader. And it takes a lot for someone to lead. How did you develop those qualities?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I still don't think of myself necessarily as a leader of people. I think of myself as I'm mission driven. I care about what I'm doing. Life is precious, right? And so as long as I'm working, I might as well do something that I care about, and I might as well do it to my very best. And so I guess I don't think of leadership as telling other people what to do. I think of leadership as caring about what you're doing and finding a way to motivate other people to also care. And then also being committed to get something done. And you can be a dictator and you can get stuff done, but you're probably going to have a lot of stress for yourself and a lot of stress for other people. there are better ways to manage a project, to manage a company, to manage a country than to be a dictator. You can see yourself as part of a team. So I think that whatever leadership that I have, it comes from caring about what I'm doing and caring about the team, and knowing that a single individual really doesn't make history. A single individual doesn't really accomplish anything on their own. It's always a team effort, right? You have this show, but there are people that are running sound, people running video, people that are running this studio. No matter how driven and talented you are, there's a team behind you. And anything that you do in life, if you're a writer, a composer, running a company, you're not going to do anything just being on your own. You need the help of other people. And so that can be humbling, right? To realize that you need other people. But that's also empowering, because then you have support. You're not out there on your own. You're less likely to burn out because you have support. You're in it with other people. And there's a lot of power in numbers.
How do you approach effective problem solving?
It starts by defining what the problem is. What challenge are you trying to overcome? I think sometimes we can be told something like, if you're hired for a new job, you might be told what to do. Like, hey, Terrence, we need you to do this thing. But start with really thinking about that problem, right? What problem are you really trying to solve? And sometimes the way that a problem is framed to you is not actually the best way to think about a problem, right? Sometimes you need to back out a little bit and look at the problem from different angles. And then when you think you know what the problem is, talk about that. Maybe get back to the person that hired you or the person that presented this challenge to you and get their feedback. You say, I know that you told me to, is the problem really defined the way you told me, or are there these other angles to this problem? So think about what problem that you're trying to solve. The next step is to do a little bit of research, right? We have this saying, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so you have some data out there that needs to be discovered. You're given a problem that you need to invent and solve that problem. See what other people have done, learn from their successes, and then put together your own project plan for how you're going to incorporate them and also what you think you're going to people in the past that have failed or haven't done things as effectively as they could have been done.
Without going into detail specifically because of your job, could you give an example of that type of experience that you once had where you had to solve a problem and it later became effective?
Sure. So at Google, I used to program manage something called the Transparency Report. And this is a report that is published externally. So it means that it's Google kind of publishing information, publishing reports for policymakers, government leaders, users, people in the media. And we have 12 different reports in the Transparency Report. One of those reports is government requests for user data. So governments around the world can ask Google. It's normal for government bodies to ask companies for data. However, Google is not a rubber stamp, right? We actually have huge teams of lawyers and legal assistants that review these requests and determine whether or not they meet a legal standard. And so we get a lot of these requests, and Google thought that it was important to publish this report and make it available externally. Now, what does that mean? How do we begin to think of like what this report should look like? We do user research. We talk to people. We try to think, what is a user? Who would read this report and what do they care about? This could be somebody working in government, a policymaker that thinks about weighing security versus freedom, wanting to keep people safe, but also not wanting to create too much surveillance or a police state, right? And so when we're thinking about what this report should look like, what information we want to include in it, how it should look, what type of functionality exists. So you could look at a website and just see a bunch of numbers, or you could download a data set and do your own analysis on that data set. So we thought about not just we need to publish a report. We thought, who are the users of this report? Would this report be useful to folks in college that are doing a research project? If so, we want to make this huge data dump available for them to do their own analysis on. We want to make sure that this report is available to policymakers, people in government, people writing the laws. And so let's make sure that that we make the language easily understandable to them, even if they're not really technically, if they're not very savvy in terms of technology, even if there are people that are not lawyers, even if there are people that don't have high rates of literacy. What can we do to make this information accessible to them? And so our approach was not just, we were told to publish a report, let's publish a report the way we think it should be done. We started by being humble, by thinking, who are the users of this report? Let's talk to them. Let's talk to people in the media. Let's talk to leaders in government. Let's talk to people at universities. Let's see what they want out of this report, and then we build it.
So is that the main goal?
Building a report?
Correct.
Actually, no. The goal is trying to inform an important conversation in the world, right? Why does it matter that we publish this report? We publish this report because we think it's an important topic, right? We think that people should be thinking about, the data that Google has and interactions that Google has or other companies like Google have with governments, right? The goal is not just to publish a report. The goal is we want people to be informed. We want people to be thinking about, how much power should the government have to access their data, right? Is there there's some type of legal process in place, right? If you have a police officer, for example, should that police officer be able to access your data just because they want to?
No.
Why not?
Because they don't have that right. We have a right to privacy.
Right, and that's a legal right, right? That's a legal right. Now, there could be a case where a police officer does need to access your data, right? Maybe you threaten somebody and somebody's scared, and that person goes to the police and says, I was threatened by this person. I'm afraid. I'm afraid that, they threatened to hunt me down with a gun, right? It would make sense that if under the rule of law, there are legitimate reasons why somebody in government would need to access your data. But there's a legal process for how that person in government would actually access your data. They can't just arbitrarily come to a company like Facebook and say, we want this person's data. Sometimes there needs to be a court order, a judge that reviews a case and says, yes, I think that under these circumstances, this company should provide this data about this person. And so, and again, I don't want to get too much into the details of my work because I'm, speaking as an individual. I'm not speaking on behalf of Google in any way. But I think in terms of what problem are you trying to solve, it's not just about publishing a report. It's about informing a conversation. It's about wanting to live in a world where people are thinking about privacy, thinking about the rule of law, and checks and balances, making sure that we don't give away all of our power and all of our freedom in the name of security. And so I think that when we were talking earlier about how I think of a project, right, it's not just doing something that you're told to do, let's publish a report. Why are you publishing that report in the first place? Because people need to be educated. We want robust discussion about important issues like security and privacy. And Google and Facebook and Twitter, all of these different companies that publish transparency reports, they publish those reports because they want to inform this discussion of following the rule of law and balancing privacy versus security and being transparent with users about what interactions look like between companies and governments.
Do you think that's solely because of different generations changing? Like, do baby boomers have that same outlook in comparison to millennials?
That's a really good question. I don't want to speculate too much. I'll say this. I don't know a lot of... my mother and my father are boomers.
Okay.
And they care a lot about their privacy. There are also some immigrant friends that I have that came from countries where the government was very strong and didn't necessarily follow the rule of law.
Correct.
I'm not going to name those countries, but I think that you can probably imagine some parts of the world where governments don't feel compelled to follow the rule of law, where governments do not necessarily respect human rights, right? And so I think for folks that emigrated from those countries and came to the United States, their privacy is very important to them. Because their privacy, it's not just a nice thing to have. It's not just a privilege. In some cases, it's about safety, right? There are parts of the world where your sexual orientation could land you in jail. There are parts of the world where your religion could get you killed. There are parts of the world where your gender means that you're not able to have certain jobs or have certain rights. There are countries where if you were a woman, you couldn't get a driver's license, right? And so if somebody is gay or a religious minority, those factors alone in some parts of the world could put their lives in danger. And I think for folks like that, privacy is about safety. It's about the ability to not be interrogated without the rule of law, to not be put in prison arbitrarily. So I don't think of privacy so much as a generational issue. I think of it more as what's somebody's relationship to privacy. And privacy is most sacred when it's about your safety, when there are aspects about your life that maybe you don't want to keep secret, right? Maybe your sexual orientation is not something that is a secret, but it's something that you want to share to specific people in your own way and in your own time. And that you should have a right to share aspects about your life when you want to on your own terms, right? And so that being said, I don't know a lot of baby boomers that use Snapchat.
Okay.
And there's features like this one feature in Snapchat. I have a friend that's about 10 years younger than I am. And there's a feature where if you reveal your location, you can see where all of your friends are also. So in San Francisco, I could see where you are at all times because we both decided to reveal our location on the map feature of Snapchat. That sounds cool, right? I don't know, man. I don't necessarily want people knowing where I'm at 3 a.m. or on
definitely.
vacation.
Definitely.
If I'm on vacation, I don't want people knowing that I'm not home and they can rob me. Right? So even though it seems cool, like, hey, I'm at a music festival, I want to know where my friends are. What a cool opportunity to see that we're in this, that we're nearby each other. But what's the trade-off? The trade-off is anybody else that is connected to me as a friend on Snapchat can see where I am at all times. They can see when I'm on vacation. They can see if I'm having insomnia and going for a walk at night. They can see if I'm at work. They can see if I'm skipping out on work and going to a baseball game. You have to trade off this, the fun functionality with what are the ramifications of giving up this level of privacy, of allowing other people, even if they're friends, even if they're significant others, that they can be surveilling you, that they have surveillance on you.
Also is, from your perspective, share some tips for a startup company that's watching this show on team dynamics.
Sure. I think the most important thing is human beings are different. Right? Not all human beings are the same. We all have human rights, but what works for one person doesn't work for another person. So I'll give you a scenario. Let's say that I have 5 different engineers. All engineers are the same, right? No, of course not.
Why not?
Because people are different. Some engineers, you can say, hey, I need you to build this program that does these 3 things, and I need it in 3 months. Some engineers, you can tell them that. You can give them the requirements and give them the time frame, and they can go off on their own. You cannot see them for 3 months, and they come back exactly 3 months later with a perfect program that works no problems, exactly meets all of the needs that you specified. There are other engineers that need a daily check-in, even if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You can ask them, how are things going? Some are very forthright, and they'll tell you if they're having a problem, if they hit a brick wall. Others, for whatever reason, maybe they're having trouble, and they think that they'll look weak if they tell you that they're having trouble. And so they don't communicate something because they think in the short term, this will reflect badly on me. And so
is that based on trust?
I think it's, trust and what we call at Google psychological safety.
Wow.
Psychological safety is essentially saying, like, I trust you to not think I'm stupid. I trust you. I trust you enough that I can share if I'm having difficulty. If I have a lot of trouble figuring out this problem. If I wrote some code and there's a bug in that code and I can't figure out where I messed up. I can't figure out where this bug is. Maybe I'm a proud person or maybe I'm a little insecure and I don't want you thinking that I'm stupid. And maybe I feel a little stupid myself because I wrote code that had a bug in it. If I have psychological safety, I can come to the team leader or I can come to other members of the team and tell them my problem. I'm not pretending that I don't have a problem. I can come to them and actually be honest with them and say, this isn't going as expected. I need help.
So is that the effective way in how one should approach team dynamics?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for team dynamics is to make sure that you have psychological safety, which starts with respect and commitments. A commitment is we're going to be respectful to each other. Even if we're angry, even if we're discouraged, we're not going to call each other names. We're not going to yell. We're not going to say that somebody's stupid because they came up with a problem that they're having trouble getting through. So I think psychological safety is a really important foundation for any team. And then the next thing as a team leader is to be real about the fact that people are different. People have different motivations. People have different working styles. And so if you have 5 different people, don't approach them all as like they're all the same. They all are incentivized by the same things. They all have the same style of working. Realize that you might need a different way to interact with each team member, and that's okay. That's your job as a team leader or as a manager, is to realize what's the best way that you can support each individual person on your team.
So in 30 seconds or less, 30 seconds, because we're running out of time.
All right.
Define the power of honesty.
Honesty is critical for a project. If you're honest, you're not hiding things. If you hide something, it'll come back and bite you, you know where. And so I think if you can be honest about things, you're not going to get a bad surprise. And as a program manager, it's my job to make sure there are no surprises. If there's bad news, I want to communicate that effectively as early as possible. I don't want to pretend that it doesn't exist. Because if you pretend that it doesn't exist and you delay it, it's going to come back and hurt you.
Well, James, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your insight. And I look forward to you coming back on more shows and attending more of the Close the Deal Show Business Mixer. It was a pleasure having you.
Great. Thank you, Terrence.
Before we close this deal, I want you all to know the Close the Deal Show has recently conducted and had a successful business mixer. And I want to thank WeWorks, as well as Bunkers Lab, as well as Farmers Insurance, as well, and for all those that came out and supported the Close the Deal Show just last Thursday. We had a wonderful time. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening.